Good afternoon, colleagues, and all those who are here with us in the gallery and our witnesses. This is meeting number 115 of the Standing Committee on Public Accounts for Monday, October 29th, 2018. We're here today in consideration of Report 6, Employment Training for Indigenous People, Employment and Social Development Canada, of the 2018 Spring Report of the Auditor General of Canada. We're honoured to have with us from the Office of the Auditor General, Mr. Michael Ferguson, Auditor General of Canada, and Mr. Glenn Wheeler, Principal. Welcome. And from the Department of Employment and Social Development, Mr. Graham Flack, Deputy Minister, Ms. Leslie McLean, Senior Associate Deputy Minister and Chief Operating Officer for Service Canada, and Ms. Rachel Wernick, Senior Assistant Deputy Minister, Skills and Employment Branch. Welcome today. We apologize for our late stay, our late coming here. We had votes in the House, so thank you for your patience and bearing with us. And we look forward to your testimony. And so to our Auditor General, Mr. Ferguson, we would invite you to open.
Thank you. Monsieur le Président, je vous remercie de nous donner l'occasion.
Chair, thank you for this opportunity to discuss our report on employment training for Indigenous people. The work on this audit was completed in December 2017, and we have not audited actions taken by Employment and Social Development Canada since then, or ESDC. Many Indigenous people face barriers to sustained employment and have low wages. This audit examined how Employment and Social Development Canada managed two programs, namely the Aboriginal Skills and Development Training Strategy and the Skills and Partnership Fund. The common goal of these two programs was to increase the number of Indigenous people who had sustainable and meaningful employment. For both of these programs, the Department worked with Indigenous organizations across the country that provided training and employment support to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit clients. Overall, we found that the Department could not demonstrate that these programs increased the number of Indigenous people obtaining jobs and staying employed.
The Department did not define the performance indicators necessary to demonstrate whether the programs were meeting their objectives. For example, the Department established an annual target for the number of clients employed after receiving services. However, it counted any employment obtained as a successful outcome, whether the work was short-time, seasonal, part-time, or full-time. This means that it didn't know how successful the programs were in helping clients find sustainable employment. We also found that the Department didn't do enough to ensure the completeness and accuracy of the data it obtained from Indigenous organizations on the results their clients had achieved after receiving services. Notably, the Department didn't know whether more than 20% of all clients who received services actually found a job or went back to school. Furthermore, while the Department used employment insurance data to verify whether clients were employed, it was able to do so for only about 10% of the program's clients. We found that the Department didn't analyze the program data it collected to identify trends, problems, or good practices that could help Indigenous organizations improve their services and results. For example, the Department spent $130 million between 2010-11 and 2016-17 fiscal years on wage subsidy for employers who hired clients for a specific length of time. However, the Department didn't track whether these clients continued working after the subsidy ended or whether they found other work. We also found that the Department allocated funding to Indigenous organizations under the Aboriginal Skills and Employment Training Strategy on the basis of 1996 population and socioeconomic data that did not reflect the current needs of the population served. In addition, the Department didn't consider individual Indigenous organizations' past success at helping clients find jobs as a means to redistribute funds to those that had demonstrated the capacity to achieve better results. Le ministère a soutenu.
The Department supported Indigenous organizations by providing them with guidance and administrative direction, and it worked to reduce their administrative burden. However, it did not provide them with sufficient labour market information to help them determine which services they should provide to help clients prepare for and find available jobs. In addition, the Department did not consistently monitor Indigenous organizations to ensure that they fulfilled their obligations under funding agreements. And it didn't use the information from the monitoring it did to know how well the programs were working. This means that it missed the opportunity to explore ways to improve program delivery and to identify systemic issues requiring attention. We made eight recommendations. Employment and Social Development Canada agreed with all of them and has prepared an action plan to address them. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Now turn to Minister Flack for your presentation, and welcome.
So good afternoon, Mr. Chair. I'd like to begin by thanking the members of the committee for inviting me here, and would like to take you through a quick update on the status of our work to implement the 8 recommendations. I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional unceded Algonquin territory, and this is particularly significant for these programs, the Aboriginal Skills and Employment Training Strategy and the Skills and Partnership Fund, which are delivered, as you know, in close collaboration with Indigenous partners. As a result, we are co-developing the responses to the recommendations with Indigenous peoples, which reflect our commitment to reconciliation and advancing a renewed relationship based on respect, cooperation, and partnership. And we're convinced that this collaborative approach will allow our partners to better tailor the programs to the unique and diverse needs of their clients and their communities. And we are applying all of the lessons from the previous programs and the implementation of the recommendations as we shift to the newly announced Indigenous Skills Employment Training Program announced in the budget, and also as we continue to make improvements to the SPF. So recommendation 1 refers to the need for performance management strategy with clearly defined indicators and targets. Since this spring, we've been engaging with our partners across this country on a distinctions basis to co-develop a new performance management strategy. The new framework focuses on measuring the program objectives to reduce the skills gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people by 50% and the employment gap by 25%. It includes strengthened indicators and enhanced reporting on post-program results. We will also provide new tools and training to partner organizations to support their implementation of this more robust approach, and we are on track to have that new co-developed performance measurement framework in place when the new program launches in April of 2019. Recommendation 2 focuses on working in collaboration with agreement holders to identify, collect, confirm, and analyze program data. In September, over 150 people participated in a national data workshop to work through the collection of data, management, and analysis of that information to support results measurement. Indicators of success are being co-developed to ensure that the outcomes of the program are meaningful to the individual communities and organizations that deliver the program. And we are also on track to put that data and tool process in place that will support improved resorting results and inform the design of interventions and services by April 1st, 2019. Recommendation 3 refers to funding allocation. As you know, Budget 2018 provided additional investments of approximately $99.4 million per year, we have been working with Indigenous organizations to develop an allocation approach for these new funds on the basis of distinction-based funding streams. Allocations will consider factors such as current employment rates, unemployment gaps between Indigenous and non-Indigenous populations, and population density and growth. This new allocation model is on track to be implemented by the beginning of the new fiscal year. La recommandation 4
Recommendation 4 speaks to the potential for overlap between programs and with the provinces and territories. While both assets and the SPF have the objective of improving Indigenous employment, we are confident that they are complementary in design and approach. We will ensure the new ISET, like its predecessor assets, will also be complementary with the SPF. With respect to provinces and territories, under the terms of the labour market transfer agreements, we have regular bilateral discussions on program complementarity. We have increased the emphasis on Indigenous programming with specific workshops dedicated to enhancing coordination of efforts. These workshops have already been completed in Western provinces and will be rolled out in other provinces and territories in coming months.
Provide labour market information that will support Indigenous organizations in aligning with demand in their regions. This is one of the most challenging areas, given that existing tools are not able to provide high-quality, highly localized labour market information anywhere in the country, not just for Indigenous communities, but in any community. Highly localized labour market information has to be built from the ground up and tested. We have a survey pilot underway in 4 First Nations communities, will be expanded to 44 over 3 years. It will collect community-level data and create skills inventories that will better support labour market planning, training approaches, and matching clients with available jobs. And we will apply the lessons learned from this pilot across the service delivery network. In the meantime, we've also created distinctions-based working groups to determine what labour market information will be most useful going forward. In addition, building on what we have to do, by April 2019, we will link delivery organizations to the existing job bank. En ce qui concerne les recommandations 6 à 8 qui mettent l'accent sur
Recommendation 6 through 8 focus on reducing administrative burden and the monitoring of funding agreements. Further to extensive consultations with partners, we've already begun implementing changes that streamline financial and administrative reporting requirements. In addition, we will be implementing a new risk-based approach. High-capacity organizations with a strong track record will see their administrative burden from reporting reduced. This will allow us to focus our efforts on organizations with a weaker track record. And it would allow us to build their capacity to meet accountability requirements. Again, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. And
while I have only been on the job for 3 weeks, I want to make clear that I view my role as Chief Accounting Officer not just as being accountable for the actions the department is taking now and will take in the future, but I am accountable to you for all actions it has taken in the past, and I will do my best to uphold that accountability to you for those past actions as well. I'd be happy to take your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Flack. I have Mr. Massé, but Mr. Arias.
Chair, in view of the remarks by the Deputy Minister, should we call a halt to this meeting and call the Deputy Minister who was involved with this decision making and the current Deputy Minister together?
All right. I think what we need to do, and I'm going to go to Mr. Christofferson, is, but certainly we want to hear these witnesses today, and we'll make a decision based on what we've heard today. I think later, but I'm not prepared, I don't think, to make a decision right now. Mr. Christofferson?
Thanks, Chair. I just want to add my strong support for the issue Mr. Arias raised, and we've talked about this before, that maybe we need to change the policy. Our policy is we don't normally call in previous deputies but nothing's changing. We're still getting, and I have great respect for what the deputy has said, but as a matter of policy, how many times have we had deputies say to us, I wasn't there, I can't answer. And if you can't answer, you can't give accountability, and if there's no accountability, there's no democracy. So when the time comes to look at this again, I think it's a very good idea, and maybe we should be looking at a policy change to deal with what the government just refuses to do, which is to put deputies in place and keep them there for a while.
Thank you. Although I am encouraged from hearing from Mr. Flack that he is prepared to answer those questions, and he is prepared to take, the accountability of a deputy minister. So that is very positive. So I will reserve our decision on whether to go further, and I appreciate, Mr. Area, you coming with the suggestion, Mr. Christofferson. Monsieur Massé, vous avez 7 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Massé, you have 7 minutes. Thank you, Chair. I understand what my colleague has just said, and I agree with Mr. Christofferson, but I also appreciate that during his opening remarks, the Deputy Minister mentioned that even if he's only been in place for 3 weeks, he will obviously be responsible for answering our questions, and his role and his responsibility relates to the issues in the Auditor General's report. And these were challenges that were brought up by his department. So I'd like to thank Mr. Ferguson as well for his report. This report sheds light on issues, and it's also an opportunity for the department, ESDC, to provide us with some additional information about its action plan. So perhaps I'll start, Chair, if I may, with a question for the department officials. The Auditor General mentioned in his report that the unemployment rate for Indigenous people is 11% in general, and we know that in specific communities, the employment rate can be even higher. So my first question, in general, remind us what the department is doing to make sure that employment and development programs that are for Indigenous peoples are better in the future and better focused on the needs of the communities they serve. Yes, Chair, the new program that we're going to be establishing as of April 1st was organized in co-development with these communities to make sure that we will have better results and achieve the objectives that they have. At the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, there was Article 7 that talked about eliminating this gap for Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples for both learning and employment. In terms of learning, there's a 50% reduction in terms of what's right now, and for employment, it's a 25% difference. You mentioned in your opening remarks, well, the Auditor General had criticized the data collection methods and your performance indicators. So since you brought up this point, how will you be able to properly collect the data in order to make sure that these performance measures that you're establishing will be met in the months and years to come? First, there'll be a reduction, or rather an increase in employment for these groups across the country. So how can we make sure that these programs are successful? I'll tell you what our challenges are. If, for example, you take someone who's on a reserve in Nova Scotia and they take part in a program financed by our department, if this person stays on the reserve and they do other training, this organization that we've worked with is available to figure out what happens to this person over the course of a year. But if they leave the reserve and they go to Halifax, for example, the organization is not necessarily able to figure out what happened to that person. So what's difficult for us is to check over a 5-year period, for example, as suggested by the Auditor General, to see what happened over time. And for people who leave their communities, it's not easy for us to do this check individually to find out what happened to them. Unless we have available data from Revenue Canada, but for safety reasons and privacy concerns, we can't ask Revenue Canada what this person is earning to see if after 2 or 3 or 4 years what happened. But what we can do, using their social insurance number, we can make a link between this data, not on an individual basis. So we can say this such and such a person, this is what happened to them, because they group the data anonymously. So we can know what training they've done, and we can see that their income after 3 or 4 years was at such and such a level. So we can do it on an overall kind of basis. But the challenge is a serious one. We can't, on an individual basis, guarantee that after 5 years we can find out what happened to that person if they leave their community. And there are several cases like this. Some people move to Alberta, they take another training program that's not related to our program, and we have a hard time gathering this information. But we have found a way to do it in an overall way with anonymous grouped data, and information will be available to communities and for researchers as well. Is this type of solution, well, I think you conducted consultations, as you said in your opening remarks. In September, there was 150 people who participated in a national process workshop. Was it organized only for ESDC employees, or was it organized for the community? It was with our community partners. I think my colleague Rachel was directly involved in that. We wanted more granular data for each community. So we wanted to get a better understanding, because there are different communities. There are some who will say, even if the ultimate goal is to obtain employment for our members, as a community, well, there's one that says, well, consult people who are very close to entering the workforce and they could do so easily. So we'll focus our program on that. But for them, the employment rate would be the figure we would use. But there's another community that will say, we want to focus more on people who are further from the job market. We want to give them literacy education. And this is different because we need intermediate measures to measure their progress.
We'll now move to Mr. Kelly. First round, 7 minutes, please.
Thank you. So, Mr. Flack, thank you for coming and I think anticipating some of the frustration that happens at this committee when a deputy minister comes and says, we accept the recommendations of the Auditor General, but since I wasn't there for the period that the Auditor General has covered, I can't explain what happened. You've expressed a willingness to be responsible for the department and to be accountable to Parliament and to Canadians for the failings of the department and shortcomings of the department. The floor is yours. Why did this department not collect data properly? Why did it not analyze the data it used? And why can the department not quantify and explain to Canadians the relative success or failures of its programs?
And you want me to focus exclusively on the data, or okay. So on the data area, there are areas that the department had data available that it did not, when it did the analysis of the data, share that data back with communities, and that needs to be done, and it will be done, and should have been done. There are areas on the data collection, though, as I've explained, where providing data collection for longitudinal data, that is, how does the individual perform over, say, a period of 5 years, as I explained, there are challenges, I understand, on how one captures that data given a highly mobile population. So the example I gave was if you have an individual on a reserve in an individual community that takes a training course in that community, we can capture the data of how they did in the year, because it's within the year that they took the course, and how they performed. If they subsequently move to a larger community, the organization that's delivering the training doesn't have access to that individual anymore and can't measure it. So those data things are challenging to collect to get longitudinally. And the way we are going to go about that, given that we can't directly access the Revenue Canada database to be able to tell you how did that individual do after 2 years, 3 years, and 4 years.
Was this not understood or known to be a shortcoming of the system at the time, or is this something that has only come really to be appreciated in light of the Auditor General's report?
You may wish to ask the Auditor General that. Inside the department, one of the reasons that they were not collecting the longer-term data is that they doubted the caliber of that data to be able to accurately reflect what was happening, given the inability of communities on the ground to do that. So the way we have attempted to address this, given that we can't access the CRA files individually, because that would breach privacy, is we found a way to link through the SIN number activities in employment and CRA filings, but it's done in an anonymous way, whereas a department, we will not be able to tell you how the individual did, but what we will be able to do with the anonymized data is take individuals who took this type of training, what were the results in income for this type of thing, and that has taken time, yes.
Yeah, I will ask Mr. Ferguson then, what explanation were you given for the department's failure to collect data and to make use of what data that it did have?
Actually, I'll ask Mr. Wheeler to respond to that.
Mr. Chair, in our audit work, we found a couple of issues that are, I think, pertinent to your question. The first was the issue of the data that the department did collect. There wasn't a lot of work done to assess how reliable, accurate, and complete that data was. It's true that the department was able to use information on EI claimants to determine whether some folks actually continued to work. But EI data is located within the department. We didn't get into observations about links to information from other departments. But maybe a related point is there also exists a lot of other departmental data that could be used to as a proxy for success. And a key example, or a good example of that, would be the wage subsidy. So the department has spent about $130 million on the wage subsidy since 2010, and on average that subsidy costs about $7,000. What we found is that the department had a lot of information on the number of folks that received services using that subsidy. So the program subsidized employers to take on people, but the department didn't then follow on and determine, based on that subsidy, did the employer keep the worker on, or was the worker able to find additional work? So there's a lot of data that exists that could be used to get at different aspects of the success of the program.
So that data was not even collected?
It was collected, but it wasn't analyzed. So the department had that data.
But that goes really to the whole purpose and point of the program, to help people to become self-sufficient members of the labor force, and to have the skills and the training and the experience that one would need to be able to continue to hold a job. So you didn't get a reason why?
Regarding the CRA data, no.
Okay. I actually want to return to that piece, make sure I even understand it correctly. So the department did not know whether more than 20% of all clients who received services actually found a job or went back to school. That means that for 4 out of 5 people that participated in the program, the department didn't know what happened to them after the participation in the program?
Mr. Chair, no, it was a situation that was for 20% of, for 80% they did know the end result. It was for 20% that they didn't know the end result.
All right, well thank you for clarifying that. Overall, Mr. Ferguson, you've in some reports, I don't think it actually might not have been in this one, have spoken of the amount, the metric for success, if that's even the word for it, has been in too many cases simply how much money was spent, as opposed to the outcome. Is there are there some broad concerns about simply judging the action of the government based on simply just money expended rather than outcomes achieved?
So this obviously is a very important program that the department runs, and what we focused on was that the objective of this program was to help Indigenous people find sustainable and meaningful employment. Okay, so we feel that if a program has an objective like that, sustainable and meaningful, then there needs to be a way to measure whether the people that participate in the program ended up getting sustainable and meaningful employment. So that's why we raise concerns about saying, well, if somebody ended up with a job, but maybe it was a part-time job and maybe it didn't last very long, is that really sustainable and meaningful? So the starting point on all of this to understand the success of the program is to go back and look at those terms. If that's what the program's intended to achieve, sustainable and meaningful, what is sustainable employment, what is meaningful employment, and then how do we track it all the way through. So I think that's our fundamental concern here, is that there's a critical objective to this program, and it's really important that the department be able to measure that, because again, if you look at the overall numbers and you see the unemployment levels are higher for this group than the rest of the population, and those numbers don't change, then you wonder whether the program is actually having an impact or not. And without having some sort of measures that are looking at the sustainable and meaningful employment, it's not really possible to say what type of an impact is the program having.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ferguson. Mr. Christofferson.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, when I found out that the next report also, this one, was going to be on, our next hearing was on Indigenous people, I thought, oh, please be a good report, please, because I'm out of options. I've already gone ballistic. What do you do after that? And now it's just so sad. And here's my concern. It was a lot easier to understand as a member of the Premier Oversight Committee of Parliament if it was one department that just continuously couldn't get their act together. I took some comfort in thinking, well, it's a problem child, it's a challenging ministry, but we're just not getting it right there. But now we've got a completely different ministry with the same kind of results. And, at some point, you start thinking the unthinkable. And if it's not the department, is it the subject matter? I mean, it does, you get immersed in enough of this and you begin to understand what some of the frustration that exists in the Indigenous communities and why Romeo did what he did and why an honorable man like him would say what he said in that place. The Auditor General in his spring report, in his message to us, said, quote, "The incomprehensible failure of the federal government," and that's not just this one, that's all of them, "of the federal government to influence better conditions for Indigenous people in Canada. Our recent audits are two more in a long line that bring to light the poor outcomes of Indigenous programs." And here's another one. In the same year, we can only go so long believing that these kind of things can build up, and that there's not going to be a reaction at some point. And I've said before, if I was a young Indigenous person faced with the history of what has happened to my people all these decades, let alone the treaties and everything else, given the way I am, I'm thinking I can give a good guess where I'd be on this subject, and how long are you going to keep me contained and quiet when this kind of stuff is still going on? And I realize I'm going on, but I don't know what else to do. We ask detailed questions, we get angry, we plead, we think it's one department, and still we come back to the Auditor General's, and I think he phrased it so well, the incomprehensible failure of the federal government to influence better conditions for Indigenous people in Canada. So we go to this report. I like to look at what the focus of the report, 6.12, page 3. The audit focused on whether Employment and Social Development Canada managed the Aboriginal Skills and Employment Training Strategy and the Skills and Partnership Fund to increase the number of Indigenous people getting jobs and stay employed. Right above that, the auditor says the department is responsible for monitoring the agreement holders' use of program funds, and yet in his opening remarks, the Auditor General also had to say that, quote, the department did not consistently monitor Indigenous organizations to ensure that they fulfilled their obligations under funding agreements, blah, blah, blah. So the key thing that was supposed to happen in this program was monitoring, and you failed. So, once again, why do we have consistent failure when it comes to our Indigenous sisters and brothers? Why?
Mr. Flack.
So I'll focus on the monitoring question, if that's where you wanted me to start, but I'm happy to go wherever you want. In the Auditor General's report in section 6.83, they lay out the statistics on how the department did on the timeliness of its financial and activity monitoring. So you can see on the core program we're talking about, that monitoring has improved over time and is now at 95%. On the Skills and Partnership Fund, it is only at 50%. That's a much smaller number of agreements and larger agreements. So what I can describe to you is, I think, part of the challenge in how we've done monitoring and why and how we're going to change it going forward that I think will allow us to get better results. So if you take organizations like the Saskatchewan Indian Assessment Group that we've been working with for almost 30 years, they have superb data, superb results, and yet we are monitoring each of these organizations, including that one, at the same level of assumption in terms of their capabilities. So we're not using a risk-based approach to monitoring. The normal way we would, through the tax system, do a risk-based approach to monitoring. If you are a sophisticated taxpayer with a track record of performance, we will not do the intense monitoring for every single year for every single thing. So the plan is to take a risk-based approach to monitoring. For those with strong track records and demonstrated track records, we will do less frequent monitoring for those on a risk basis, adjusted basis, and that will allow us to focus more resources on those organizations that have lower capacity, because the monitoring ability also reflects, in many cases, the ability of those organizations to give us the data because they've had staff turnover and other issues. So although we've made improvements on this to make this sustainable over time, what we are going to do is take this risk-based approach to monitoring that will give us more resources to focus on the areas where we've had less monitoring. Does that?
It's an answer. I mean, I hear the answer, and I hear the sincerity. It's just, I've also sat here enough times when it just doesn't happen. Let me ask a very specific question, if I can. On page 5, it's a very, very straight-up question. Page 5, 6.24. The department developed a performance measurement strategy for each of the programs to measure and report on results. However, we found the department did not fully implement. For example, this is just as an example, the department, and I'm quoting, the department said it would survey agreement holders annually to assess whether it was adequately supporting them to deliver services under the strategy. It also said it would prepare internal reports annually to inform senior management about the performance of key aspects of the strategy, such as efforts to help increase the capacity of agreement holders. However, the department did not fulfill either of these commitments. So you can understand my skepticism when you make promises and they don't get kept. So why weren't two obvious promises not kept? Why?
So I'm going to need some help on this one, but before I go to that, I understand your frustration, and I want to assure you, as public servants, we join to make a difference, and we are committed to doing that. And as a public servant who happens to have Perry Bellegarde as his neighbor, I have an added incentive because he explains to me on a regular basis, along with Val, where we aren't holding up our bargain. So part of the change that we've made going forward is, rather than us determining all the things we need to collect and what we need to do, Rachel has led a co-development process with the Indigenous partners to identify for them what data is being useful. Because part of the challenge is, and you've seen this in the other part of the Auditor General report, there has been complaints about the administrative burden of some of the collection we're doing, some of which the communities don't feel is necessary for the things they're dealing with. So in the new performance management framework we'll have in place in April, one of the differences is that's been co-developed so that the partners on both sides see the validity in the pieces of data we're collecting and commit to be able to collect that data. So that's one way I think it's going to make a difference in terms of the outcomes, because this isn't something that has been just opposed. But Rachel or Leslie, do you have specific information on that paragraph? I apologize, in my studies I did not.
Very quick answer if we can. We're at 8 minutes already, so we're a minute and a half over. So
for sure, the performance measurement strategy was focused on quick returns to work, and returns to school. What we heard from our Indigenous partners is that that wasn't really tailored to the multi-barriered clients that they deal with. So fundamentally, most of their clients need several interventions and a lot of emphasis on skills development, starting, as we mentioned earlier, with basic skills, moving through employability skills to get to the point where they're ready for employment or to go to higher education. And so there was a fundamental flaw in the way that we were focusing on returns to work and returns to school, because it wasn't allowing our partners to measure progress and real results in improved skills development for their clients. So what we're doing in the new approach is, not only is it distinction-based and better tailored to clients, because an Inuit youth in the north does not have the same challenges as a Métis urban youth, so it's distinction-based, but we're putting in new indicators that will better help us measure the real results that are happening. And there are real results happening on the ground. Our Indigenous partners develop and design these programs, and they are looking for things that will better capture that they gained work experience, they gained skills, and they're moving up and getting where they need to be to access that sustainable employment.
Thank you very much. We're at 10 minutes, so we now go to Mr. Sarai, please, or Ms. Yip. I'm sorry. Ms. Yip, you have 7 minutes.
Thank you for coming. Just to follow up on that, will the Indigenous people be consulted again before the final strategy is implemented as a kind of like a last check?
Yes, it's a co-developed strategy that the Indigenous partners will be agreeing to, and that we work at all levels. We also meet with Indigenous leadership, and we work through the government's permanent bilateral mechanisms to deal with the Indigenous leadership. So it will be a co-developed and agreed to approach.
Just to give a concrete example of that, what that means on a distinction-based approach is our Inuit partners may say, for example, we wish to focus our energies further upstream, which means we need a different set of measures than just employment, because there are going to be multiple steps, given the multiple barriers those upstream clients are going to face before they can get to employment, and we'll need measures for those steps. We may have another community who wants to focus for the folks who are closer to employment, and for them, the measures we've been using around employment, although with the added element that the Auditor General has rightly stressed of the durability and sustainability of that employment, would be a more appropriate measure to have initially. So the measures will not be uniform across Indigenous organizations. There will be some tailoring to cover the specific goals that they are trying to achieve, and that will differ based on the clientele they're focusing on.
That's good. This is in regards to recommendation 6.73 on labor market information. So the department indicated it will further improve available labor market information through an extended survey pilot beginning in April 2018. The department says that they recognize the importance of providing timely, detailed labor market information. But this information, as the OAG has stated, will not be available until 2022. How can a new strategy be developed if it's not going to be available until 2022?
So I've spent a lot of time digging into this, and as an economist, I understand the limitations of statistical collection at a micro level. So let me just walk you through this. What we want is comprehensive, accurate, timely, and cost-effective data. To get that at a micro community level, whether it's a small town or a reserve, does not currently exist in Canada, and it does not exist in Canada because the labor force survey is not a sufficiently granular tool for statisticians to be able to accurately predict, based on the surveys they do, what the micro labor market conditions are. So the first point is this data is not just absent for Indigenous communities. If you ask the Government of Canada, what's the micro labor market data for the community of Canso, we are not able to give you assurance around that because the statistical collection tools do not allow us to have comprehensive, accurate, and timely data that will do that. So we are embarked, and this was based on funding that came through Budget 2015, on a groundbreaking strategy, working with Indigenous partners to try to collect that data at the micro level in a way that's going to be accurate. Now, not only is that going to take time, but I want to be clear with the committee members that we are in a ground that Statistics Canada would say is going to be very, very difficult to achieve success on. Why would I say that? Survey will be the dominant vehicle that we'll use to collect. If in a large national survey you have a low response rate, you can statistically adjust those results to equalize for regional data. If you're in a small community level and 30% of people don't fill out the survey, those results will not be comprehensive, accurate, because you're not able to project based on that data rate. Another challenge we have on reserves is the frequent movement of individuals on and off reserves, which quickly changes the accuracy of the data. And in this pilot, we're going to annual collection, not monthly collection, which would be much more expensive. So the accuracy of that data is going to be a challenge. I just say that Statistics Canada has cautioned us that they, with the most expertise in the country in this area in doing this, have said that this is a very challenging endeavour you're undertaking. And the other feature of the endeavour, as you indicated earlier, is we're doing it with Indigenous partners by having them train the individuals to collect the data because they believe they're going to be able to get higher response rates if they do that. So I guess we're highlighting that we would love to have this data. No such data exists in Canada for any community. We are trying a pilot that will work through this, but I want to be clear with the committee that there are real questions around whether at the end of this pilot we will be able to demonstrate that in a timely, cost-effective way we can get comprehensive and accurate labour market data at the micro-community level, because we've never done that before. So we are putting all of our efforts into this to try to do this, starting with 4 communities to expand to 44. But we have not, in the statistical experts in government and outside, been able to find shortcuts to get this type of data, which does not exist. But the Auditor General is absolutely right to point out that this absence of data in all small communities is a real gap. Because if those communities are trying to predict workforce needs, having that data would be important. But again, I would point out the data does not exist in any small community anywhere in the country because the statistical tools of the Labour First Survey are not able to give you that reliable data at the micro level. So this is how we're trying to take the approach. But it is going to take time, and I want to be clear with the committee that there is not a guarantee we're going to succeed on this.
You have a minute left, Ms. Yip.
Okay. What is the status of the labor market programming overlap among the, I guess, the federal and territorial supports? Are Are these overlaps being immediately dealt with?
So I guess the first point, as somebody who's done a lot of federal provincial programming over his career, is overlap and duplication between federal and provincial programs is not a bug of federalism. It's actually a design feature, which is when you have two jurisdictions spending in those areas and they are continually adapting their programs, the risk of overlap is always going to be there. So we have mechanisms at the multilateral level with all of the provinces and territories, and at the bilateral level to try to continually deconflict so that we can always make those programs aligned in a way that don't overlap. But this isn't something where you do a study once and then everyone locks their programs in place and it doesn't move. They continually adapt, and we have to do that. And as an example, increasingly programs are introducing innovation elements to their programming where they're going to pilot different things at a community level. For there, you can't just deconflict at the program level. You have to look actually in the community where a program officer in Nova Scotia might be trying something different that actually is similar to something we're doing, and we have to get those officers on the ground talking. But I just want to highlight that we do have a process to do this, but it's going to have to be an ongoing process. So when the Auditor General pointed out that we said in our 2016 risk profile that one of the risks was overlap and duplication, that will always be a risk in federal provincial programming.
Thank you, Mr. Flack. And I just want to go back to Ms. Yip's question just for a moment. Not the last question, but the one before, where you talked about the pilot projects that you had in four. And I got to say this, just from my perspective here, it does not sound like you have a lot of confidence, really, in the process that you're going through. You state that you know you're trying the pilot project, but there is just no guarantee that the data. And when I hear deputy ministers come in, and it's almost like they're waving the white flag of surrender. Now, maybe I'm misinterpreting that, but it just seemed to me like that. You know, you don't have a lot of confidence, and you've been in the position for 3 weeks. You know, is this something that's been designed by somebody else that you aren't really willing to sign on to? It just sounds very hesitant.
No, I have met with the folks who've done the design and have had, in fact, we had a half-day session with Statistics Canada last week as well, not on this specifically, but on other elements. I'm confident that the best statistical people we have looked at this and come up with the best approach we can to develop this groundbreaking data. Okay? So I'm confident that the approach that's developed has the highest prospect of success in something we have never successfully done in the country, which is collect micro-community, accurate, timely labor force data. So my cautions are, we are also going in aware of issues like movement in and out of communities creating statistical challenges for us. So we are trying to design with communities in ways that will overcome this. For example, having Indigenous delivery of the survey, we think will increase the survey take-up, as opposed to Statistics Canada, the department doing it.
All right. Mr. Ferguson, you know, are you confident in some of the processes that you've seen them, that they've talked about today and that they're trying to implement?
Well, I think what you've just heard is that it is extremely difficult to get accurate information at the micro level about you know, jobs and where jobs are available and what types of skills are needed. They have consulted with the statistical experts in the country in Stats Canada about how they would go about to gather that type of information. I think at this point what I am hearing is that they're saying that they have a way that they can move forward and try and move forward on this, but they are not yet sure that it is going to succeed. So if there are ways for them to try and do some of that work, you know, without, you know, trying to do it across the whole country in the first instance, to try and understand whether they would be able to succeed at it or not, then it would be prudent to take some steps into it. I think, though, the other thing that I would say at this point is maybe it's time for the department just to say, okay, we know what we would have to do under the Statistics Canada approach, but let's before we go too far down that road, let's go back to what are we trying to do here, right? And what we're trying to do, the fundamental piece of our recommendation was, in order to know what types of training that these Indigenous people need, you need to know, what types of jobs are there, what skills are in demand, where are those jobs, what skill sets do people have, how would we train people, right? So it's going back to those fundamentals about, is there any other way to find out what are the jobs that are available and what are the skill gaps that are available. This may be the only approach to do it, and if so, they need to take some initial steps into it to see whether it can be successful. And if those initial steps seem to indicate success, then carry on. If not, take a step back and say, is there another way we can look at getting this data?
Thank you both. Mr. Kelly, I stole some of your time, but
that's all
go
right.
ahead.
I'm sure
Everybody's
give it back to me.
There's been a little extra time for everyone here. So
I do want to really return to the accountability aspect. This is a committee where accountability is to be delivered to Canadians. With all, I appreciate some of the remarks we've heard. There are many other committees of Parliament that can examine different ways that we can solve policy issues. There's government operations, human resources, Indigenous affairs. This is about accountability for what has happened. And I didn't really get much of an answer in my round. Mr. Christopherson very bluntly and succinctly pointed out that there is no answer to the question of why. I think we would probably mostly agree that every government for at least for the last 40 or 50 years has in good faith and earnestly examined the systemic barriers to employment and to better and conditions both on reserve and for Indigenous Canadians that live in cities. And yet, as has been pointed out, we struggle to answer basic questions about what happened to the money that we spent on programs. So I'm going to ask Mr. Flack for another crack at the answer to why. But before I do want to also say, Mr. Chair, that I'll add my voice to support from Mr. Aria's point that it would seem that we really do need to speak to Mr. Flack's predecessor. Go ahead.
So let me unbundle the why and give some different categories. So on the question I just answered on the availability of labor market data at the microgranular level, I think the why is because no such instruments existed. That's why we didn't collect it. And that's why we had embarked starting in 2016 on a program to try to collect it, but that program is not yet advanced enough to have that data. So on some, the answer to the why is there were technical limitations on what we could do. We are working through those, but as the Auditor General indicated, we are doing that on a pilot basis to test it with FOR.
How could that have really come to be a surprise at this point when we've been struggling for decades with the policy outcomes that aren't being met, and how did it take until 2016 to really have it come to light that data isn't collected or that there are indeed difficulties and as the sort of cold water that you are pouring on expectation going ahead about maybe intractable problems with collecting data?
Right, and it's not a surprise, but given the centrality of that data to allowing programs to operate on the ground, because that labor market information is critical to how they operate, that's why we're pushing further on that. There are other areas where we had collected data, for example, as the Auditor General indicated, where we didn't measure whether it was long-term employment, we just measured whether there was forms of employment, and I would characterize that as deficient collection in terms of we should have worked to collect more granular data about the length of employment. And then there's stuff that's in between. And the stuff that's in between is, as my example, this longitudinal tracking of an individual and how they did. Perfectly rational to say, can we know if individual A, after 5 years, what the effect of the intervention was and what their outcomes were? If those individuals are moving outside the zone of the community, that is a very difficult thing to track, which is why I think the department focused on these short-term measures, because they were trackable. You could deal with them with the account holder. So what we've done there, as I indicated, is we've tried to develop a new methodology that maintains the anonymity of the data that will allow us to track that by category. Yep.
If I may, quick question, just for the record. So you've said you're 3 weeks into it as the current deputy. Where did you come from? Were you from the department? Or from?
I've been at the Department of Finance, the Privy Council Office, Natural Resources Canada, and most recently at the Department of Canadian Heritage, where we did extensive programming regarding Indigenous languages, which is, I think, the closest proximity to this one.
Okay, thank you.
We'll now move to Madam Mendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I will cede the rest of my time to Mr. Sarai. Thank you all for being here. Actually, I don't really have a question. I'm going to make a statement on Mr. Ferguson's message, not these last reports, but the ones fall 2017, on the fact that we tend, as governments, to focus a lot on process and not necessarily on outcomes and how we deliver for people, for Canadians. I think that when we ask ourselves the why of these failures, we have to look very much at the relationship we had with First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and how we saw the service provider, as we saw ourselves as the service providers, and almost as the supervisors of how it was being done. When it's reasonably recent that we've changed this approach and we changed the relationship we have with Indigenous peoples. And I think that's part of the why of the failure, is that for decades we saw this very much as a I pay, you deliver kind of service. And now it's a partnership, and it will take some time to correct the way this is done. And I do appreciate that the efforts you're making to elaborate these programs with Indigenous peoples, that you are getting them to tell you what they need and what they actually will be able to work with, will perhaps be the change that we need to see for the future. So I just wanted to make that statement, and I would like to pass my
Thank you, Ms. Mendez. Now,
you.
Mr. Sarai.
Thank you. My first question is to you, Mr. Ferguson. I think you were saying that, sorry, Mr. Flack, you were saying that now you're going to use SIN numbers as data, but be ambiguous to do that. But was that not available prior? That seems like an old way to track where somebody works and to see the success of it. And it seems like I'm a rookie at this, but there's people that have been here for a while, and this is an epidemic problem. Would that not be a metric to use before?
So we can't track. So the trick on SIN, the real trick on outcomes, is not just measuring employment, but income levels as well. And for that, we have to link it to the CRA database. Now, we are not able, obviously, to do that in a direct way where we could track a specific individual. So the work that had to be done was on linking the information we have on EI and SIN and the CRA database on an anonymized basis that met all the privacy standards. Not just to give us a global result where we can say of the people in the program their average income was X, but the tricky part was working through that we want to be able to say to them, for individuals who had these type of interventions, like literacy training, etc., can the model kick out for us what the results were after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years on the income? And that was extremely tricky to work through, and that's what has been, in fact, worked through. Okay. So it isn't just an awareness of employment, because that's the other thing, too. For self-employed, knowing the SIN number doesn't tell you if they're actually if they're with an employer who's issuing slips to them, it works, but if they're self-employed, it's different. So because of the diverse clientele, we think the best way to get at the data that the Auditor General has rightly said we need to have to track not just how we're doing now, but how those individuals do over time is this linked database. But it is tricky.
Maybe to the Auditor General, how is this program different from other accountability mechanisms, say for in immigration, there's settlement agencies that do employment training. There's also ESDC that does them for other non-Indigenous actors. Are they tracking in a better way than this program is tracked? And are there best practices they can utilize for them? Or is this a problem with all employment training programs?
I can't tell you. I'm not quite sure when the last time we did an audit on this type of a program was, which I think is telling me maybe it's time for us to go back and look at some of the others. That would be for something to come. I don't have the answer to it right now.
My, I guess, last question would be, is this just an issue of denial of not wanting to state that the effectiveness of those programs are low in percentage, and therefore program directors are trying to find a number that shows a higher success rate, or is it specifically a problem with these type of programs? I would be more satisfied in knowing that an employment program had a 5% success rate or 10%, but we know it's effectively helping 5 or 10, and it's better than the last one that was at 3% success rate. Is this just a cultural program problem where nobody wants to admit that it's not a successful program?
Well, I wouldn't put it that way, but the way that I would put it is, it's a common problem that we have seen in many government programs, that sometimes the way performance is measured is based on the information that is easy to capture and easy to report, rather than putting together a performance measurement regime that really looks at has the program achieved its intended outcome. And again, in this case, and we don't make up the objective of the program, we look at what the departments say the objective of the program is, and the objective that they said of this program was sustainable and meaningful employment. If the objective of this program was simply, how many people managed to get at least part-time employment, then our report would be very different. But because they said it was about sustainable and meaningful employment, then we wanted to see a performance measurement strategy that would let us know whether it was being successful or not. And what we ended up seeing was, there were some things that were being tracked, but again, they didn't make a difference between somebody getting full-time employment versus part-time employment. So is that really sustainable? But I don't think that's an issue that is just unique to this program or this department. I think that's a problem that I've talked about many times in front of this committee in terms of the way that different programs measure their performance.
Thank you, Mr. Sarai. We're coming up close to 5:30, but because we missed so much early, and we do have bells coming again in another half hour, would it be all right of the committee and of our guests if we just extend this a little bit longer for some of the people that haven't had the opportunity to ask questions? We're good with that? Consensus is yes. All right. Now I have Mr. Kelly, and then back to Mr. Well, a few people were shaking their heads, so you make a quick judgment on occasions. Mr. Kelly, and then back to Mr. Area.
All right, thank you. And I perhaps in the interest of time, I won't take out a full 5-minute round then, Mr. Chair, but just perhaps to Mr. Ferguson then, being able to accurately judge the success of a program, it is extremely important. And when it was mentioned in part of the testimony we've heard that there are barriers to employment to Indigenous Canadians that are far beyond skills training. At the individual level, people need to have skills to be able to get and obtain and keep a good full-time job. But I've traveled to the north with the Finance Committee where we heard about other significant barriers, absence of roads, absence of all kinds of other infrastructure that impede economic development in remote communities. There may be some critics would say if programs can't be judged to be successful, the funds ought to be allocated to other things like roads or water treatment systems or other forms of airports in remote areas. So what can we really tell Canadians about success that has been achieved in this program so that Canadians might not demand of their parliamentarians the money be spent in other ways?
Well, I think that's part of the fundamental question that we were looking at when we decided to undertake this audit, right? Again, as you said, amongst the Indigenous population, there are higher unemployment rates, lower participation in the workforce. So there are all of those indications that that Indigenous people need help getting into the workforce. That's something, as I think the department has rightly said today, that they need to work on, not on their own, but with the Indigenous groups and communities as well. But fundamentally, if there is a program that is intended to try and help Indigenous people get sustainable and meaningful employment, and I think at this time the program was spending about $300 million a year, and I think we heard today that there will be another $100 million a year, so taking it up to $400 million a year, we would hope that we would be able to finally see a change in some of the outcomes. And the Deputy Minister did mention, I think, some very specific performance measurements that they are going to track now in terms of, I think it was reducing the skills gap by a certain percentage, and so some very specific, we want to do this by this percent. And I think those things would be the types of measurements that would give us all a better sense of whether this money is achieving what it was intended to achieve, which is sustainable and meaningful employment for these populations. That's what we're looking for. I can't answer the question of, is there another approach? What I can say is we need to have some way of knowing whether the current approach is working or not.
That's good. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. We will now go to Mr. Area. Mr. Area.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Flack, how much money has been spent on these two programs till the last financial year?
The program split is, Rachel, it's for the last financial year. So
no,
do you mean
till
year
the
to
last
date?
Financial year.
So for the full previous financial year or year to date?
No, when did this program start?
There were different iterations of this program. In the most recent financial year, the program going back, if I could go back to 2010-11, for the first iteration, since that period, the total expenditures would have been $2.4 billion on this program and $300 million on the Skills and Partnership Fund. Those would be the cumulative totals.
2.4 billion, you said?
Since 2010-11, if I take all of those years together. So right now, before we move into this new funding arrangement, it's just around 300 million for the main program.
Mr. Flack, my riding is Nepean. I haven't had any infrastructure funding there. In fact, there's no federal government funding money I have taken there, though we have one railway crossing that is required where an accident occurred, 6 people died, and the city can't do it because it's $100 million. So for us, every single million is a very, very important thing. Here we have spent $2.4 billion plus about 300 million, and we don't know whether it has been used effectively. Any good has been done out of that. Don't you think that it is sort of unacceptable? It's too uncomfortable to hear that number?
So here is what, since the department, as the Auditor General indicated, was tracking instead of the sustainability, the meaningful and sustainable, with the longer-term measures for the reasons that I said, the challenges around doing that. Since the department instead chose to focus on short-term measures, there were measures that the department was able to assess based on the performance of the program.
Okay, in the measures, I'm sorry to cut off.
So for example, $1,600 incremental income achieved by those individuals in the program.
No, sorry, I apologize to cut you off. You have some measures. Okay, let's say that you said that the new framework, you want to measure the objectives to reduce the skill gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people by 50% and employment gap by 25%. That's the new target.
That will be the meta target, but then we'll have to have specific.
So for the 2.4 billion we have spent so far, how much it has come down?
So if we look at the unemployment figures from 2010, you would see that Indigenous unemployment in the country has reduced. But what we cannot do is correlate the program spending We would not want to attempt to tell you that we can definitively say it's this program spending that has caused those improvements, and that's part of what we're trying to do going forward.
For all the new and old programs combined, how much we are planning to spend this year, this financial year?
So this year, the split, Rachel, is?
$342 million in 2018-2019 for ASETs.
Incremental 99 million has been added in the budget that will begin the next fiscal year.
So the point is that we have been spending 342 million. That's for all the programs, related programs, right? Okay, we are spending 342 million based on the previous commitments. We still don't know how effective it is. Now we are putting another 100 million more onto this. Shouldn't we just hold on to that till we see, or till we set up something to measure it better before spending it?
The new framework will be in place in time for the new spending to come online. So the new money, we are not going to start spending the new money until we have the framework in place, and that framework will be in place April 1st.
You also said that, we need quality, highly localized labor market information. I think Mr. Kelly did mention about it, that we have been spending money, $2.4 billion all these years. Didn't we get that information? Didn't we spend any money getting this quality labor market information so far?
Sure, there was information so if you think of the program as creating the equivalent of an employment office on the reserve, for example, they had market intelligence about what employers were asking for. The Canada Jobs Bank provided a source of data that allowed us to provide that information. So yes, there were absolutely sources of information, and for the second program, for example, in the Lower Churchill, when they had a big project, they indicated this is the labor we anticipate we need, and we had information that could be used to make the judgments about where to go. What I'm saying is the type of data the Auditor General said we would all like to have, that timely, comprehensive, correct data at a micro market level on the standards we would be used to if we were looking at, for example, Nova Scotia. That has not been something that's been statistically possible. So I don't want to say there's not been no data. There has been. But there hasn't been the type of comprehensive data we would all like to have for the reasons I talked about, that it's not present in any community, given the statistical limitations.
Thank you, Mr. Flack. And we can come back to Mr. Area, but their time is up. Mr. Christofferson, please. Thanks, Chair.
I have two questions. One, on page 12, 6.46 of the Auditor General's report, he says, quote, "We found that Employment and Social Development Canada allocated funding to agreement holders under the Aboriginal Skills Employment Training Strategy on the basis of 1996 population and socioeconomic data that did not reflect the current needs of the population served. Also, the department had not updated the formula it used to allocate funding under the strategy since the formula was established in 1999. Now, the last thing I am is a statistician, but I don't think you have to be all that bright to figure out that using information from the previous millennium is maybe not going to give you the best outcome. So my question is, how can something that obvious continue on with, and there's so many smart people, caring people, how can stuff like this go by, where people just for decades go, yeah, that's just the way we've always done it? Like help me understand how things like this can be.
So to be clear, they didn't say, let's just leave it the way it is. There were two serious efforts made to update the formula in 2003 and in 2014. So as context for why that didn't succeed, let me give you two data points. The first is between 1999 and 2016, Parliament voted the exact same level of funding for this program every one of those years. So there was no growth in the program funding over those almost 20 years. The need for those programs grew dramatically over that time. So when we attempted, in an environment where there was no new funding, twice, in 2003 and 2014, to update the formula, we worked with Indigenous partners and were not able, not surprisingly, to reach agreement with them because even though everyone's need had grown, adjusting to the new formula and the new data would mean some would lose funding because that would be the only way to fund the others whose need had grown even better. So the first barrier was Indigenous communities did not accept that there could be any change in the formula. They said there needed to be incremental funding, but Parliament did not for 20 years vote incremental funding. The second challenge is, as you are aware, grants and contributions in departments of this order are not delegated to people like me to make the decisions. Ministers make those decisions. And I've seen this across a wide range of programs I've dealt with, Aboriginal policing program at Public Safety, or the culture programs at Canadian Heritage, where you have no resource growth and a growth in the client communities. Ministers, not surprisingly, as I think you would all understand as political actors, are reluctant to make changes to a program that will result in a number of the recipients losing funding and others getting more funding when they know that all of them have had needs grow up. So we did attempt to revise the formula twice, and were unsuccessful, both with Indigenous communities and ultimately with ministers in convincing them to do it, notwithstanding their efforts to do that. So how is that going to change going forward? The new element is we've got $100 million in new funding. And in my experience, that is what it takes to get movement on the new funding. So we are negotiating with Indigenous partners on what the criteria are we are going to use for the new funding to ensure that, as the Auditor General indicates, it takes into account these factors. But I just want to be clear, this wasn't that officials were not trying to do this. But Indigenous communities did not want to make those changes, given that it would involve cuts for them. And political actors, in my view, not surprisingly, in an environment where they didn't have additional resources, were not willing to do that either. What's changed is the new resources, and that's what we're going to try to do.
If the audit hadn't come out, would you have done that anyway? Like take another stab at it? Because I got to tell you, the idea of, oh, we weren't able to do it, and then you just leave it and walk away.
In my experience, when new funding is injected into a program, that is the opportunity where the recipients and the political actors are willing to consider changes in the allocation formula.
All right,
so we were going to do that anyway, yes, with the new money.
Thank you. One last quick question. And I'm asking you and the Auditor General to help us. You've mentioned that you're entering into a pilot project. The Auditor General has confirmed your concern that it's complex and that there's no guarantee of success. The one thing that would be horrible is for us to walk away from this and then 4 years later the AG goes back in and finds out it didn't work. So, is there a way that maybe at the end of the, I think you were doing 4 as a pilot, that maybe you could give us an update on that and let us know and share it with the AG so that we can be with you as you go through this and providing whatever assistance we can, but more than anything to avoid, you know, down the road going through this all again, because this is not fun for anybody.
We'd be happy to do that. And as I say, we are also continuing to look at alternative sources, but that area of localized, highly accurate data is a tough nut to crack, but we would be happy to indicate where we are after we've done the pilot with the 4, and happy to share that with the Auditor General as well.
I think that might be helpful. Thank you so much, Chair.
All right, thank you. Do you have another one, Mr. Airy, or a very quick one? Yes, go ahead, sir.
Since 2010, 2011, the amount of $2.4 billion was spent. How many Indigenous people were served?
400,000 clients with 140,000 finding jobs and 70,000 returning to school. But as the Auditor General indicated in his report, because we did point-in-time measurements, we are not able to give you data on the degree to which the employment was sustained beyond that. So that's the information we have.
You know, when we started this off, I did request the chair to consider halting this meeting so that we can get the deputy minister who was in charge of or your predecessor, we had these issues on and off for quite some time. Auditor General brought it to our notice and expressed his concern. We had the clerk of the Privy Council before our committee defending that the tenure of the Deputy Minister is not as bad as the Auditor General says. And internally, I defended the clerk of the Privy Council because he produced some numbers. However, what I have started noticing is that there are some problem departments which the Auditor General has gone back again and again to see that no improvements from audit to audit. And it is in those departments we also have at least I have noticed that the Deputy Minister also keep changing. The departments are a problem because the Deputy Ministers keep changing, or the problems in the department, and that's the reason why the Deputy Minister keep changing, I don't know. So this is a very major concern to us, and Chair, I think we have to consider going forward whenever we invite a Deputy Minister to find out how long he or she has been in the position, and if the Deputy Minister has been around for a short period of time, say for less than 1 year, maybe we should also simultaneously invite the previous Deputy Minister too.
So, in answer to your question, it's my understanding that the previous Deputy Minister was in their position for 2 years. At least when you look at the dates, I think that's what somebody showed me here. Ms. Livonian, 16th of May 16 to 8th of October 2018. So a little over 2 years. So,
Mr. Chair, I had over 4 years, happy years at Canadian Heritage. I believe in long tenure. I think it's critical to an organization. And although I don't control it,
I'm sorry, Mr. Flack. We are not saying that it happens at every single department, but some of the departments with the Auditor General has gone and found problems over a period of time. I would like to ask the Auditor General, Mr. Chair, that is it because there are problems in the department that the Deputy Minister keeps changing, or is because the Deputy Minister keeps changing the problems exist in the department?
That's a question I can't answer. I don't know the reason that Deputy Ministers in some departments change often. My concern, again, as I've said before, is we see often deputies changing in some key departments like procurement and in national defence, and some of those very large departments where we've seen them change quite often. So I don't know the answer to your question.
Thank you, Mr. Area. Mr. Messe, quickly.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to really underscore the work of your entire team in preparing for this meeting, Deputy Minister. As we often say to Deputy Ministers who come here to answer difficult questions, the question we've asked you have been particularly difficult. And personally, well, as my colleagues have as well, we've really appreciated your answers. They were very specific, and they directly answered the questions that were asked. So I'd like to mention this because it is to your credit, because after 3 weeks only in your position, you're very much in control of these files that you've been made responsible of. So you've done excellent work. You still have a lot of work to be done, but I believe that you and your team will be able to meet these challenges, and I am looking forward to inviting you to appear before the committee again to give us an update about the programs that you manage. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Messe.
Because I don't see any other questions, and but I do want to go back to Mr. Christofferson's question, and I'm just I was kind of trying to direct our analysts to check an action plan, because Mr. Christofferson asked a question in regards to local data. And I do see that in the action plan that has been brought forward by the department, that they have really committed to improved and tailored labor market information. And it looks like, you know, that is maybe in up to 17 assets, Indigenous organizations, and 60 First Nations. Is that the pilot project then? So that's the pilot project. So the action plan on data, it has been addressed in their action plan. And so I'm hoping that we can maybe have an update on that action plan. I know sometimes on pilot projects you have to wait until the entirety of the pilot project is finished, but I'm hoping that maybe one of the directives that we can maybe get is some measured achievable goals, and we can see whether there's been achieving or not. Because I'll just, when I went through this report, and maybe for the Canadians that are watching out there, it sounds like we've been fairly tough on our witnesses. But when I went through this report, there was just a recurring theme. And the recurring theme was the two words, did not. And so I went to my staff and said, listen, did not? Count the did nots. And every paragraph, the department did not. The department did not collect the data or define. The department did not have the information about the nature of those jobs. Department did not fulfill either of these commitments. Department did not establish targets for. It did not revisit the targets. It's just every paragraph the department did not. And in the meantime, we have a government that has, rightfully so, made a commitment, and Auditor General quoted out of your report. The government made a commitment 3 years ago to reconciliation and a renewed relationship with Indigenous peoples. And then when a department does not or did not, it really takes away from a government direction, right? And so, I can tell you, sometimes you wonder how you gauge a government. Well, you gauge a government on results, and sometimes the departments are the ones that carry out the government mandate. And if the government mandate, doesn't matter how, the announcement by a government, their intentions, when you have 43 did nots in the report, yeah, I think we can expect another meeting back here at Public Accounts. But in a way, I want to thank you for coming. And I agree with Mr. Massey. Mr. Flack, you really certainly have, you seem to have a good understanding of the problems that have happened before your tenure. You were there 4 years. Some of the other deputy ministers are there 2 years. I'm of the opinion, when there's that many did nots, maybe that's part of the reason why a deputy minister is changed out. But we like it when there's success in every department. If I'm going to, and I've told other people this, and this is just, if an opposition is going to hold a government to account, I think every political party expects that the departments are at least going to be able to carry out the government's mandates. So politically, I can make the question of their mandate, but boy, when a department is not really carrying out some of what a government wants, it's not good. So thank you for coming. Thank you for being up to date on the issue. And I can tell you, with all sincerity, I hope your action plan works, and we can see the success. We can see the measured success. I know you have good people in your department, and hopefully we'll really see some marked progress moving forward. So thank you very much, committee, on a very tough report, and all the best to the department in seeing a solution to some of this. We're adjourned.